Well, it's great that you could find time to join us. Julia Fischer. I guess you say Julia when you're speaking German and Julia when you're speaking English, or do you always go Julia?
No, a mix and match. I don't care, really. I listen to both,
So just tell me a little bit about your personal background.
Well, as a scientist, my personal background, I think, started more or less with my PhD, which I got in Berlin at the Free University with Dietmar Tott. And I studied Barbary macaque vocal communication, categorical perception in Barbary macaques. That was my PhD.
I remember.
Yeah, way back then. And then, I think I got really lucky when I got an offer from Robert Seifert and Dorothy Cheney to work with them. So I did my postdoc with them. The first postdoc, I took over Baboon Camp. So I went to Botswana. I lived in the wilderness for 1.5 years. I studied 85 wild Chacma baboons. And that was just an amazing time, not only because of all the experience, being out there. I was really not an outdoorsy person before that, but then I quickly became one and I loved it. And then also, of course, the intellectual challenge of working with them, which was really, really fantastic. And then after that, I went to Leipzig and joined the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, and was somehow between Mike Tomasellos' department and Christoph Spösch's department, because of course, as a field person, I was, hanging out with the other field people a lot, but intellectually, I was very much attached to Tomasellos' department and the discussions that went on there. And that was a great time also. And then I got the offer from Göttingen in 2004. And moved here. I'm a professor for primate cognition at the University of Göttingen, but I also had the cognitive ethology lab at the German Primate Center. So it's like a bridge professorship.
Okay, that's all about your scientific life, but let's go back further in time to when you were a kid. I mean, how did you become interested in animals and biology and animal cognition? What brought you to this in the first place?
I think mainly I was interested in science from a very early age on. So I think one of maybe the third or fourth book that I actually read myself was on scientists like Kepler and Galilei. And I was just intrigued by doing science. I found this so interesting about, because I was always curious as a kid. I always, like, the most frequent word my parents said was why. Why this, why that, how does it work? Tell me, and I was interested in engineering. I loved airplanes. So my dad had to take me to the airfield when there was an air show, and I knew all the airplanes like other people know birds. And so I was very interested, but I was also interested. I think I was interested in basically everything, languages and sociology and history. And then I had this fantastic teacher in school, a high school teacher, and she was just really good at making us think independently in the classroom. Yeah, so she let us set up hypotheses, and we had, of course, we had very little knowledge, but she made us think like scientists do, and so that really attached me to biology. And also, I like complexity, complex systems. And I think then biology is for you. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, then when I started to study, like from day one, I thought, this is it. Yeah, it really broadens my horizon also because it's technical also, which I wasn't. I was booky. I was a book type, but so I got to do things with my hands, and then we started doing excursions, and I met people. We went on sailing trips. We did these bird excursions. So a whole new world opened up, and I think initially I wanted to become a marine scientist. Mm-hmm. And I went to Glasgow also for a semester and studied aquatic bioscience. But then I thought, yeah, but the animals need to be bigger than so I wanted to see the things with my own eyes. I think that was sort of a selection criterion. And then I thought, well, maybe marine mammals. And I went to Cambridge, and they said, yeah, really nice. You can do your master's with us, but you should finish your coursework first. Go back to Berlin. This is what I did. And then there was a course on animal behavior. Going to France, study primates with Kurt Hammerschmidt. And so, okay, I signed up for the course. I we went there and I thought, those monkeys are really, really cool and really interesting and really fascinating. So this is how, and then I was just hooked. So monkeys were it.
And that was the Barbary macaques at Rocamadour that you?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
So they're the ones who got you hooked you from becoming an astronomer or an engineer and made you into a real biologist. Good.
Yeah. And then we read How Monkeys See the World by Robert and Dorothy in the journal club. Yeah. And I thought, wow, and these are the questions that I want to address. So this is how it all got started.
Cool. I didn't know that the Barbary macaques were the kind of the beginning.
Yeah, they did me in. And the funny thing is, I've been going there since 91. Wow. So 30 years. So, and then seeing the same animals over and over and over again is that's also quite an experience. Yeah.
Cool. So this is your keynotes for a cognitive science conference. What do you think the study of animal cognition has to contribute to the broader field of cognitive science? Why do you think it's important?
Well, being a biologist and an evolutionary biologist on top of it, I think if we want to understand humans and human cognition, we have to understand where we come from. What is the evolutionary heritage? What's the primate heritage? What's the animal in us? I don't buy into the blank slate conception of the mind. I think we have evolved dispositions, and then you need to take a comparative perspective and understand what is shared, what is ancestral. And then I think only then are we able also to understand what is uniquely human. Yeah. And so for this, to have a complete understanding, I think it's indispensable to take this comparative perspective and be informed about what other animals are doing. And also, so what are the selective pressures that gave rise to certain abilities? Why do we have certain biases? Where does this come from? What is the evolutionary background to this? And then, of course, we are extremely flexible. We are, learning plays a great deal, but that's also evolved. The ability to learn. So I think we need to put, both the experience side and the evolutionary heritage side together to really understand the human mind.
I couldn't agree more. I will ask, so what you said.
So it's been a rhetoric question.
But so, you've spent most of your time studying primates, but what about us crazy people who are studying dogs and alligators and birds? What good are they, if any?
Well, first of all, you can take a really broad perspective. So dogs are mammals. There could be shared mammal traits and so on, but also there are convergences. So you could have similar selective pressures that give rise to similar abilities, and they evolved independently from one another. So that's also important. And then I think it's also about just understanding general principles of evolution. So sometimes it's not about the human, but it's about understanding evolution in itself. How does it work? What are constraints? How do they operate? What's the developmental side of things? And if you don't have that, I think then it becomes, you always will have a very sort of limited view of what the mind does. Yeah. So therefore, ants, perhaps we don't learn so much about the human mind if we study ants, but ants in itself are so interesting. The solutions they've come up, how to navigate in the world. So in this sense, they're again informative if you want to understand cognition in more broadly.
Mm-hmm. Great, good answer. Let's go back to Botswana. You mentioned how lucky you were, and I have always envied you for your time at the Baboon Camp. What were some of your best and maybe worst experiences in there?
I think the worst experience was on day one when I sunk the car in a mud flat. And then it started to rain, and then a thunderstorm came, and we couldn't get the car out. And Robert had left the large high lift jack in camp. but they were gone. Yeah, so we had the car, no high lift check, it was pouring down with rain. I had sunk the car in the mud, and we had to wait until the thunderstorm was over. We had to dig with our hands, yeah, and collect wood from far away, and then finally we got the car out. But the good thing was then afterwards I thought, okay, I survived that, you know, so I spent the night in the car, you know, we got the car out. Okay, you know, shit may come, but I'll get out of it.
I can take it.
Yeah, I can take it.
And that's with like hippos and crocodiles running around, right? I mean, it's not like you're just sitting in you know, suburban New York City.
No. That way, yeah, that was sort of in the middle of nowhere. And then what was also a very stressful experience was basically like on the, you know, we had another 3 days to go before we went home. So it was like, I felt like I walked a tightrope, you know, over a canyon for 1.5 years, because there are lions, hippos, snakes, you know, whatnot, buffalo, loads of things that are dangerous. And then you think, okay, 3 more days, you know, and then I made it. And then in that last week, we had basically a lion encounter every day. And that was the one where I walked, it was in the afternoon. So that's a bit critical. You still have to come home before it gets dark. So it was in the afternoon. And then the grass was high, I coughed for some reason. And then 5 lionesses jumped out of the long grass right in front of me and ran away.
Fortunately, you scared them. They were terrified. Huh?
Yeah, they were terrified. And then they turned around and then they started walking back. And I said to Court, I think we need to find a tree.
Wow.
And then we were sitting on that tree. And the lionesses were somewhat in the distance, sort of checking us out. We were sitting on the tree and, you know, pondering, should we stay on that tree the entire night or should we just go home? But, you know, having the lionesses right there and sort of licking their lips. We decided to walk home, and that was very stressful. Yeah. But we made it. And I poured myself a large whiskey when we, you know, had made it back. But there were so many magical moments. I mean, too many, you know, I could go on forever, but just say, you know, an evening, the sun is setting, you sit there on this little terrace in front of the kitchen, and then there is a cow-calf herd of elephants ambling by, or you see the giraffe at the horizon, like going to the water hole. And oh man, I mean, it was magic. And there was not a single moment in 1.5 years where I was bored. I just loved it. The stars, like watching the stars every night and like checking for 1.5 years, how does the sky actually change, you know, every night a little bit. And it was fantastic. Yeah.
Wow, what an experience. Great. Let's go back. Let's see. Do you want to talk about vervets or go straight to aging?
Yeah, we can do the vervets.
So working with Robert Seyfarth and Dorothy Cheney of Vervet alarm call fame, you of course, we all heard about the famous alarm calls of vervets, the snake call, the eagle call, the leopard call. And you've done some, I understand, rather colorful work on the vervets. I'm not sure all of it's been published. It involved sneaking around in leopard suits and things. But so what's your take on the vervet alarm calls now after all these years? What did they mean? How do the vervets interpret them? Are these really proto words, like the beginning of language, or what?
Well, my take has not changed so much. I think even after, you know, reading the papers for the first time, but that was my view. And I think sort of the majority was still more excited. And I think what we know now is that these calls mean a lot to the listeners. They can draw inferences, and they can draw a number of inferences at the same time. They know who's calling. They know, is this a reliable signaler or not? What's the age of the caller? So if it's a juvenile, maybe, you know, you don't have to respond necessarily. They can make pretty good predictions when they hear a certain call type, what's going to happen next. And then depending on the circumstances, they can make adaptive decisions, whether, they keep on foraging or whether they run into the tree or whatever. So there's a lot of information available to the monkeys, and they can use it and behave in an adaptive way. What is baffling is that at the other side, at the signaler side, there is no such flexibility in the sense of determining the structure of the call. So the structure of the call is hardwired, and to a degree that I was even surprised to find. So we studied it's a congener, so it also belongs to the same genus, Chlorocebus, but the West African variant. And they've been, depending on who you ask, separated from the East African Vervets for something between 1.3 to 2.1 million years. Yeah, so quite some time. We showed them a drone, and we were interested in, what do they do? Do they produce something that sounds like an eagle alarm, or do they produce something new because they've never seen a drone in their lives? And they produce a call that sounds exactly like the East African eagle alarm. There is no variation. Mm-hmm. And this is baffling. And I think we still don't understand why there is so little flexibility. The flexibility comes in at when do you produce a call? So the Vervets then learned quite quick, or the green monkeys in West Africa, they learned quickly after a few, showing the drone a few times, that the drone is not really dangerous. And then they stop calling. So it's not a reflex. But if there's something in the air they don't like, they make one call type. If there's something on the floor that they don't like, they make the snake alarm, if they kind of, go for it and mob it. And if there's something big and dangerous and it has round ears, looks like a lion, or it has, the spots like a leopard, then you produce the other variant. And then, of course, there's a lot also overlap. So they're not as neatly separated. So there's some murkiness there. But overall, you can say, yeah, they have these alarm calls, but they don't have more. If they had proto-words, they should have had more alarm calls, then they should have been able to come up with more variation and then organize themselves and say, okay, how do we call this thing now? And there is no such conventionalization. And that is really striking. I mean, it's interesting to see how a communication system can be so powerful, that is so constrained on the one hand and so flexible on the other. It still makes it a very powerful system. But it's baffling how little structural, influence, volitional influence on the structural variation they have. Yeah, that's still striking to me. But that's out of my hands now. I feel like the Evo-Devo people should go there. They need to understand the development really of all the structures, the neural structures, and how it integrates with the vocal production apparatus. Why is it that there is no more flexibility? Because we know from birds, they learn their songs, and there are vocal learners around other than humans, but not the non-human primates, certainly not the Vervets.
But so in a way, the amazing thing about them is their ability to interpret these rather inflexibly produced calls and have a very rich interpretation. So it's more like a mother who's able to interpret her newborn baby's cry. It's not that the baby's cry has been learned, it's that the mother is learning how to interpret that.
Yeah, or think Rico. I mean, the dog we studied, right? Just barking, and very rarely, he was a very silent dog, but, barking, maybe growling when he was really pissed off. But then he knew 200 toys by the name. So huge amount of flexibility, learning capacity there. And also he could do simple sentence-like structures, like bring that toy to the kitchen. He could do that, or to the bathroom or whatever. But nothing at the, he wouldn't talk to you and say, I really don't like that yellow ball there.
Yeah, that's what would be more amazing.
Yeah.
So lately you've been studying aging in monkeys. How did that come about, and what's your goal in that line of research?
A little bit of serendipity, but also intuition. So one thing was, going back to Rocamadour, because now I go there to teach mainly. So I take the master students, for 2 weeks to France, and then we show them how to do behavioral observations and so on, and do a little research project for themselves. And then just seeing these monkeys aging, it's like, oh, look at the 277. So they have numbers, but for us they mean a lot. So the 277, we all know who that is. So look at her, and it's like, yeah, she looks like her mother when she was. So you just see it, It's like, and then you think, what is actually happening with these animals now? And then the other thing was that in 2003, I was elected into the Young Academy, which is a great idea, bringing youngish people together, so around 5 years after your PhD, from all the different disciplines, and give them a playground and let them talk to each other. And this is where I met Alexandra Freund. She's a psychologist from Zurich, and she studies aging and in humans. So we started talking about the theory. So which theories are out there? And so we teamed up actually for the first study to test some of the predictions from socio-emotional selectivity theory and other theories that are out there to explain what happens in humans when they get older, how their behavior changes. And so these two together, so I had my observations, and then I was introduced to that body of psychological work. And so that got us going, really, to study the monkeys. And I think now we really have a nice set of studies together to understand a couple of the things, but we keep on going. So it's not over yet. But of course, it's sometimes you feel like, gee, does this study make me old? So am I self-priming by thinking about what it means to be really of old age?
Well, so, at least we live longer than, 30 is a pretty old monkey, right?
Yeah. They look very old. And of course, you only get these kinds of animals in an enclosure. So it's a lovely, it's a huge park, but they don't have predators, and they get fed. And you wouldn't see ever such an old monkey in the wild. Yeah. So in the wild, like when I studied those baboons in Botswana, they were all, in perfect condition, because everyone who wasn't, had been taken away. So, yeah. So it's a bit, sometimes we compare them to sort of our modern societies, so they're living a pretty good life, good food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
TV, pretty soon they'll have cell phones, right?
Yeah, so there's this one lovely anecdote when they had decided to take one of the social groups of the park and reintroduce them to Morocco, to put them back into the wild. And one female, the C23, disappeared when they started the capture. And then they waited and waited and waited. and then they said, finally, we're going to pack it and leave. She showed up again. And Kurt always said, well, the monkeys, they would certainly like to go to Morocco and look around, but then they would all come back to the park and say, we prefer this.
Right. Just go on vacation.
Yeah.
How did they do? How did the ones who were brought back do?
We don't really know, because the person who studied them, he had an accident. So we never knew. Yeah. But what the rumor was that the females were taken over by local males, and the reintroduced males didn't make it. But it has never been written up or published, unfortunately.
Wow, interesting. Well, I look forward to hearing more about the aging in monkeys, and hopefully some positive spin for us aging humans in your keynote. All right, let's end. What do you do when you're not being a famous scientist? What do you do for fun?
Well, that depends on whether you ask the pre-pandemic, Julia.
Yeah, let's imagine the pandemic is finally over.
Yeah, I really love the movies. So that was a big thing, going to the movies with my husband, going to the Berlinale in Berlin, to the big film festival, going to bars, restaurants, theater plays. So the urban life sort of as a counterpart, because what I didn't actually talk about is that when I started in Göttingen, we set up a field site in Senegal. So we are studying now a different species of baboons, but I don't have time to talk about this now, but that's also a really cool place to go. And then the counterpart is Berlin. So doing urban things and traveling, hanging out. And now I think my main luxury is it's so nice to have dinner with people again.
I know.
It's just the best.
We had the first get together where we could actually sit around and drink wine at the end of a conference and talk. And it was like, my God, I missed it.
Yeah. So the first time we went to a restaurant, we were like, it's happening, it's happening. Somebody's coming to the table and asking us what we want to have to eat for dinner. Yeah. So, yeah. So, but I would say, yeah, and the other thing is, I really, one of my dreams is go back sailing again. So, yeah, that would be lovely.
Yeah, I have a little sailing place down from me on the Danube, but all you can do is kind of go back and forth across the Danube. It's not exactly sailing in the ocean that's what you mean?
Yeah. We went to Iceland once and to Norway, and I'm yearning, to go back on a boat. Yeah, I'm working on it.
Sounds good.
Sailing to Senegal.
Sailing to Senegal. Wow.
No, just kidding. But that would be it. I think that would be really cool. Yes.
Huh. Okay. Any final words you want to add?
No. It was lovely talking to you. And of course, it would have been better in person, but this is what we do now. And I hope that, at some point, this will be possible again.
I'm sure it will. It won't be.
Yeah.
I just got my second vaccination yesterday, so.
Cool.
Okay, Julia.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.